So good morning friends. Your topic is digital filters. Let us first look about what is actually filtering. So filters are said to be signal conditioners. Why they are signal conditioners? Because filters are the circuits that are having a capability to pass certain frequencies and while attenuate the other frequencies. Right? And that's why they are said to be signal conditioners. We design the filters in such a way that we can get the desired output by eliminating the unwanted or the interfering signals from the input. So directly jumping into the digital filters, let me first of all give a small background of what are the types of filters. So basically there are three major categories of filters. They are low pass filters, high pass filters and band pass filters. So you could see here in the above figure I have shown you all the ideal characteristics. So this is a low pass filter which is the ideal low pass filter. This is high pass filter and this is a band pass filter. So all these three are ideal frequency response. Why do we call it ideal? We call it ideal because we have a smooth pass band, we have a sharp cutoff in the stop band edge, right? So in all the three cases you could see we have a very smooth pass band and very sharp cutoff. And that's why we say to be ideal frequency response. But in practical designs, we don't get such kind of ideal characteristics. So how is your practical frequency response? Your practical frequency response shows certain ripples in the pass band. They show certain ripples even in the stop band. So in all the three cases of practical frequency response, what you observe is you observe ripples in the pass band, in the stop band, you observe ripples in the pass band, and even what you observe is you don't observe a sharp cutoff. So this is how we get a practical frequency response. Now our aim is how we could make these practical responses much more better suiting a certain application and how to design such kind of digital filters. Jumping into digital filter, let us have a close comparison between analog and digital filter. So, and what are the positives about analog filters? Analog filters basically have a dynamic range, both in amplitude as well as frequencies. So, analog filters can be designed from a minimum frequency to a very large frequencies up to giga and terahertz. Whereas that is a small limitation when we go for digital filters, with the limitation in the range of the digital filters that is dependent on the sampling rate that you use, and hence analog positive is that there is a large dynamic range which is independent, which is not dependent on any characteristics of the filter, right? Whereas in digital there is a limitation in the frequency range that we design. Analog filters are fast and they are cheaper to design as compared to digital filters. Going into digital filters and digital positives, right, the very first advantage that we see here friends is that they are programmable. We can have a programmable solution for digital filters. The way we write the algorithm to design the digital filters decide the cutoff or decide the characteristics of the filter. And as we change the algorithm, we get a complete new set of filter designed. And hence we say they are programmable solution. That is the biggest advantage of why we go for digital filter. We did not have to hamper our hardware. We need not have to change any major changes in the hardware that we are implementing. A small change in the algorithm, a small download of the algorithm into the processor simply gives us a completely new set of digital filter, and hence we say it's a programmable solution. The other thing that we observe is that we get an exact linear phase. So we'll go into this as we move into the details of digital filter. And the other advantage that we see is tolerant to environmental. Since there's no hardware involved here, everything is based on the algorithm that we write, right? There's no impact of environmental effect like temperature, variations in the hardware that we see in analog components. There's no such kind of environmental effects observed on the digital filters. Moreover, even digital filters are highly accurate. They give us much better SNRs as compared to analog filters, and therefore we say that digital filters have definitely certain more advantages over analog filters, and that's why we say the winner is definitely the digital filter. So let us now go into what are digital filters. So digital filters are basically, as I said, is nothing but we write an algorithm, we write certain set of mathematical operations that operate on the input signals and that results into desired output signal. So input signals can be audio, image signals, music signals, right? And output is what we desire. The modified spectrum is what we expect. The digital filter should modify the spectrum of the input signal and gives us a modified output spectrum. That is the role of a digital filter. So what is basically digital filter is nothing but a set of mathematical operations that we write in the form of an algorithm that we implement into a certain processor, and the processor operates on a set of input signals resulting into the desired output spectrum. Before we go into much more detail about the types of filters, let us first of all focus into what is actually a digital filter. Friends, digital filter is actually an LTI system, a linear time invariant system. And this digital filter has its own impulse response. Since it's an LTI system, every LTI system is governed by impulse response. So this impulse response is nothing but the behavior of your digital filter. And then if I now define my digital filter as shown here with Hn indicating its impulse response, applying an input Xn and getting the filtered output Yn, I am now interested in getting what is the relation between input, the digital filter, that is the impulse response, and the output, that is Yn. So I am interested in getting the relation between Xn, Hn and Yn. Unless or until we have this relationship, we cannot design the filter. So the input-output relationship between the input, the filter, and the output is nothing but the convolution relationship, because digital filter is nothing but an LTI system. So the relation between the three is governed by the convolution operation. So I get the output Yn by convolving the input Xn with the impulse response that defines the filter. Remember, impulse response here is describing the filter. So this is the convolution equation that you have seen many a times. You have studied in signals and system. This is the relationship of convolution. So Xn convolved with Hn gives me the output Yn. If I look in frequency domain, the same convolution becomes multiplication of their spectra. If we apply convolution theorem, right, then in frequency domain we know that convolution becomes simply multiplication. So if y omega is the frequency spectrum of Yn, x omega is frequency spectrum of Xn, and h omega is frequency spectrum of Hn, then I have a relationship like x omega into h omega. The product of these two, earlier they were convolving in time domain. If I look at the same thing in frequency domain, it is as if they are multiplying. So convolution becomes multiplication. So y omega is x omega into h omega. Now this frequency domain analysis becomes easier for us to understand the filtered output. So what we see is that x omega is the input that we have applied to the system, which is not in our hands. H omega is the filter and y omega is the output. So output is what we desired, the way we want. We expect the output to be in this form. So to get this expected output, who plays a very important role? Definitely it is H of omega. So H of omega needs to be designed in such a way that it modifies my characteristics of X omega to give me the desired output Y omega. And therefore we say that the shape of the impulse response, that is Hn, or in frequency domain you say H omega. The shape of this H omega determines which properties of the original signal are filtered out, because we cannot modify the input. What we need to do is adjust the characteristics of the filter in such a way that it applies this characteristics, modifies the input, and gives us the desired output y omega. So what we understand from this particular discussion is designing the filter, it means designing Hn in such a way that it gives us the desired output Yn. So filter design means calculating Hn to give us the desired output characteristics Yn. Filter is completely described by the impulse response, and therefore we say that impulse response acts as a filter. The way you design your impulse response, whatever modifications you do on your impulse response, you correspondingly get the filtered output Yn. So filter design means designing the filter, the impulse response of the filter, and therefore we say impulse response defines the filter. Now here is an example. What has been done is we have taken the digital filter, assuming the digital filter is of such a form. What we have done is we have found its frequency response. If my impulse response of my digital filter is of such a form, if I find its frequency response, I observe that its frequency response is of such a form, right? And it is in a form that it exists from point 2 to point 3. It means that it is like a band pass filter. It is in the form of a band pass filter. If I assume my digital filter, my impulse response to be having such a characteristics, and then I look into its frequency response, right? This is my digital filter Hn, and this is its frequency response, right? In that case, then if I design my impulse response in such a way, I have got a characteristics to be point in the range from point 2 to point 3. Everywhere else my frequency response of impulse response is 0. Now if such is the characteristics of my frequency response H omega of the filter, and if I look at the relationship between H omega and X omega, what do I know? That it is the product of X omega and H omega. So if I have designed my H omega to be having a characteristics existing only from point 2 to point 3, and if I take a product of such a frequency response, I get the output to be existing only between point 2 to point 3, because I see that my frequency response from is existing only from point 2 to point 3. Everywhere else my frequency response is 0. So if I take a product of such a frequency response with my input, definitely my input characteristics will be modified, and input which is existing only in the range from point 2 to point 3 will be allowed to pass, resulting into an output which is a band pass filter. Right? So what I want to show you by this example is that the way we designed our impulse response, we get the desired characteristics. So if I assume my impulse response to be having such a characteristics in time domain, it results in a frequency response that is existing only in the range from point 2 to point 3, acting as a band pass filter. So this band pass filter will allow only the input signal X omega in the range from point 2 to point 3, resulting into frequencies existing only in this band and resulting in an output Y omega, which is a band pass filtered output with the band edge frequencies point 2 and point 3. So we clearly understand here that the way we design the impulse response results into output resulting into the characteristics as desired by the system. So if I here design a wide band pass filter, I get the output to be having a characteristics of a band pass filter. If I design my impulse response as a low pass filter, if I design this to be having a characteristics of a low pass filter, right, then output will be entirely a low pass filtered output, because the characteristics of the impulse response governs the overall output characteristics, because we are taking Y omega to be the product of X omega into H omega. So the way we designed our H omega decides or governs the overall output of the system. If my H omega has the characteristics of a high pass filter, then I can say that my Y omega, that is the filtered output, is a high pass filtered output. If I design my impulse response as a low pass filter, then Y omega will have the frequencies as governed by the frequency response of the impulse response. Therefore, friends, designing filter means designing a proper impulse response of the system. So, what are the types of the filters now? So, there are basically two types of filters: finite impulse response and infinite impulse response. Let us look at each of them in details. Finite impulse response. So as the name suggests, the impulse response here is of finite duration. You could see from the figure that the impulse response is of finite duration. There are only finite number of samples from some minus q, could say, so to some plus q. There are some finite number of samples existing in the impulse response. Everywhere else beyond this, the impulse response is zero. So when the impulse response is of finite duration, you say that your filter is of a type FIR filter. And how is the governing equation of the FIR filter? The FIR filter is given by the equation as shown here. Yn is summation k goes from 0 to m minus 1 hn x of n minus k. This is the governing equation of an FIR filter. Expanding this, you get the equation of this form. So when you look at this expanded equation, you clearly understand that output is a function of only present and past inputs. Is it not? Yn, that is the output, is only a function of present and past inputs when I talk about the FIR filter, right? And it means that output is not dependent on any past output value here. Output only depends on input, present and past inputs. If such is the case, you call the filter to be non-recursive filter. So FIR filters are basically non-recursive filters, and this is the governing equation of FIR filter. Similarly, when I look into IIR filters, infinite impulse response. So the name itself tells that the impulse response is of infinite duration. You can see here my impulse response is of infinite duration, right? The samples continue indefinitely, and therefore we call such a response, if your impulse response has such a response, you call it to be an infinite impulse response. How is the equation of your IIR filter? Your IIR filter has an equation as seen here. And if you observe the equation carefully, output Yn is function of present input, past inputs, along with there is certain dependency on the past output values also. And therefore this output in an IIR filter is said to have a kind of feedback because it is dependent on one or more previous outputs. So if the output has a feedback term, you call such a filter to be a recursive filters. So IIR filter are basically recursive filters because there is a feedback involved there. And feedback, who decides feedback? If the output has dependency on output values, some past output values. You could see here output is dependent on y of n minus 1, y of n minus 2, which are nothing but past output values. So if output is a function of past output values, you say that such a filter is a recursive filter that involves feedback. So what we understand now is FIR filters do not have feedback as they depend only on the present and past inputs, whereas IIR filters, which are infinite in length, right, involves feedback. To get such kind of infinite response, you need to have feedback in the system. And the moment there is a feedback, definitely output is a function of past input terms. And such an IIR filter involving dependency on past output values are said to be recursive filters. So IIRs are basically said to be recursive filters. What are the steps involved in designing FIR filter and in designing IIR filters? So these are the steps which are commonly observed in both FIR filters as well as IIR filters. So the first step is filter specification. The second step is filter coefficient calculation. Third step is doing the realization of the filter. Fourth step is analysis of finite word length, and fifth step is implementation. So these are the common steps involved in the filter design. Let it be a FIR filter, let it be IIR filter. These are the steps which are commonly observed in any filter design. So whenever we start with filter design, it is essential to understand the filter specifications. Understanding the filter specifications, then we go into designing the filter, resulting into calculation of the filter coefficients. Once we get the filter coefficients, we perform the realization. So realizations may be direct form 1, direct form 2, cascade realization. So these are the different realizations. What is the intention of doing realization in any filter design is to know the hardware requirement of the system. The next step involves is analysis of finite word length. Here, before we implement it in a processor, we need to understand the processor specifications, what are the word length of the processor, and what is the effect of the word length on the coefficients of the filter is very, very essential. So whether truncation of the word length results in some variations in the filter specifications is what we need to minutely observe, and we say such an analysis to be analysis of finite word length. And finally, we go into implementation of the filter. So our particular topic is only restricting to the first two. We will be only looking at filter specification and filter coefficient calculation. Let us understand filter specifications completely. So here is a low pass filter response shown to you. A practical low pass filter response is shown to you. So basically we see three regions in the low pass filter. The first region is the pass band. You could see here, this is your pass band. This is the stop band, and the region between pass band and the stop band is called as the transition band. So in the pass band, what we expect to have in the pass band is a very smooth pass band very smooth response in the pass band, right? But that is not true when we come for a practical filter response. We observe ripples in the pass band. So this is called as ripples. These variations that you observe in the magnitude of the pass band, these are said to be the pass band ripple, because since these ripples lie in the pass band, they are said to be pass band ripple. So we use delta 1, or some books mention it as delta P, as denoted as the pass band ripple, tolerance of the pass band. And omega p, what you observe here, omega p is the pass band edge frequency, or indirectly the cutoff frequency. So omega p is called as the pass band edge frequency. Coming to stop band, right? What we expect in the stop band is complete zero attenuation, right? A very sharp attenuation is expected in the stop band. But what do you see here? We observe that there are ripples in the stop band, and these ripples in the stop band is said to be delta 2. We measure the highest peak of these ripples and call it as delta 2. So delta 2, or some books mention it as delta S. Delta S is a stop band ripple, right? Also called as the tolerance of the stop band. So this is the stop band characteristics, and omega S indicates the stop band edge frequency, or indirectly the cutoff frequency, stop band cutoff frequency, also called as the stop band edge frequency. So omega S is the stop band edge frequency, omega P is the pass band edge frequency. Then what is this transition band? Transition band is the band which occurs when we go for a practical response, because we don't get a sharp cutoff. There is a roll off observed from the pass band to stop band. So in ideal frequency responses, transition band is 0 because we observe a sharp cutoff. But in practical response, transition band exists. And a good filter design is one wherein the transition band is minimum. The transition band should be minimum in wherein when we go for a good filter. So how do you calculate the transition band? Definitely it's the band, it's a difference of omega s and omega p. So if this transition band is minimum, it means that you are having a sharp cutoff characteristics of the filter. So why we are focusing on filter specification is because whenever we start to design a filter, we have been given certain specifications using which we design the filter. So unless and until we understand those specifications, we cannot design the filter. So basically the specifications involve these characteristics: the passband edge frequency, the stop band edge frequency, the passband ripple, and the stop band ripple. So these are commonly given terminologies when we discuss the filter specification. Okay, now let us look at FIR filter design. So today's lecture will focus on FIR filter design. So there are basically two methods of designing FIR filters: Fourier series method and window method. So both these methods of FIR filter design basically involves the same process. So very first step involved is we have to start with the given filter specifications. From the given filter specifications, we decide the desired frequency response. Once we describe the desired frequency response mathematically, then we can apply the Fourier tools. We will now apply inverse Fourier transform and we will now transform from frequency domain to time domain. Once we come into time domain, we get the filter coefficients. From the desired frequency response, we apply the inverse tools and we get our filter coefficients. And we use these filter coefficients as the resultant filter coefficients of our filter. Then what are the steps now observed in Fourier series? How do we decide the frequency response? How do we calculate the inverse Fourier transform? And how do we finally decide the filter coefficients? Let us look at all these three steps in detail for both these methods. Let us first look about the Fourier series based method. The very first method that we will discuss is the Fourier series method of FIR filter design. So as this just discussed, the very first step of filter design involves the given filter specifications. So you could see here this figure. Let us assume that this is the given filter specifications. So which type of filter is it? It's a low pass filter. And we are assuming the cutoff here to be 500 Hz. So we have been asked to design a low pass digital filter with a cutoff frequency of 500 Hz. So with these specifications, we first of all describe the frequency response of the filter. When we are to design the frequency response from the given specifications, we always start by assuming that our filter should be an ideal filter. And that's why you could see here we have taken an ideal low pass filter with a sharp cutoff at 500 Hz. So this is the desired frequency response with which we start to design the filter, assuming a sharp cutoff, a very smooth pass band. So from the given specification that the cutoff frequency is 500 Hz for a low pass filter, we assume that this is the frequency response of the filter that we expect to design. Once we have this specifications ready, then what we do is we apply the inverse Fourier transform and come from frequency domain and transform the signal from frequency domain to time domain. So the moment we apply inverse Fourier transform, this is how we get the impulse response of the filter, right? So the impulse response we denote it as h of n. This is the impulse response of the filter that we have assumed with the specifications given to us in the problem, right? So by applying inverse Fourier transform, we have obtained the impulse response of our filter. And as discussed previously, designing the filter involves designing the impulse response of the filter. So it means that we have obtained with a single step, we have obtained the impulse response of the filter. Does it mean that this is the step wherein I expect to get my filter coefficients? Let us answer this question by looking at certain observations that we have obtained from the impulse response. The first very observation that is seen when we have obtained the inverse Fourier transform and got the impulse response is that the impulse response is of infinite duration. Let me focus on this. The impulse response as seen is infinite in duration, right? So if I call this to be my filter output, then I am not describing the filter that we expect to design, because we expect to design an FIR filter. An FIR filter should be a filter of finite frequency response, finite impulse response. But this filter that we have, this impulse response that we have got, is of infinite duration. So this is the very first observation, that I cannot call this to be my filter coefficients because these impulse response is of infinite duration. Second observation is that if we closely observe, the impulse response is symmetrical. The impulse response is very symmetrical, about 0. And third observation is that it is non-causal. So we'll go into more details of this. The very first thing that I need to resolve is that I cannot call this to be my final filter coefficients because this is of infinite duration. So I need to do something additional into it before I call it as my final frequency response, final filter coefficients, right? So let us look at how are we going to modify the impulse response that we have obtained from our filter specifications. So this first figure is the impulse response that we have got from our filter specifications. The first thing that we need to do is, I cannot call it as my FIR coefficients because it is of infinite duration, and hence what we do is we simply truncate it. So we have done a simple truncation. What do you mean by a simple truncation? It means that we have terminated the coefficients around certain value. So we have picked only certain samples from the impulse response, and rest all the samples, as you could see here, we have terminated it to 0. And now I can say that this filter coefficient is of finite duration and I can now use it for my FIR design. So the first step is in the modification of filter coefficient is we have made it finite by truncating the samples around certain region, right? So we have selected, let me say, some from minus q to some plus q number of samples. Rest all the samples beyond it are terminated to 0, making the impulse response finite duration. The next thing that we need to do is we have to maintain the symmetricity, right? We want a symmetric impulse response, right? And that's why we have truncated. We didn't truncate it from 0 to certain m number of samples, friends. The way we truncated is we have maintained, during truncation we have maintained the symmetricity. The reason behind maintaining the symmetricity during truncation is to get the linear phase response, because the biggest advantage of a FIR filter is that they have linear phase response. So what do you mean by linear phase response? The phase response, that is, phase is nothing but the delay in the filters, right? Every filter has some phase response. During the phase response, why we say it should have a linear phase response is that all the frequencies, when they are being passed through the filters should be delayed by the same amount. If your filter is not a linear phase filter, then in that case it may happen that your filter will delay the frequencies with different delays. Right, certain band of frequencies will be delayed longer than the other band of frequencies, resulting into a completely, you could say, mishapped output. Right, we don't want such a characteristics of the filter. A filter should always have a linear phase characteristics in which all the frequency components of your filter will be delayed by equal amount. That is the meaning of linear phase characteristics. So linear phase characteristics is a very useful characteristics of the filter, and these characteristics can be maintained in FIR filter by maintaining the symmetricity. So if we get a symmetric impulse response, indirectly we have obtained the linear phase characteristics. So that is the reason why when we truncate that infinite impulse response and make it finite to call it as an FIR, we truncate it maintaining the symmetricity. So you could see here we have maintained the symmetricity here to obtain the linear phase characteristics of the FIR filter. The next thing that we observe is that the impulse response is non-causal here. It is having the coefficients around some minus q to plus q, and that's why we need to make it causal. This causality is maintained or obtained by just simply shifting the impulse response. You could see here we have done a simple shifting of the impulse response so that we have all the coefficients lying on the positive scale of the axis, right? And this, if we do, indirectly we say that we have obtained the causality. We have maintained a causal, or we have obtained a causal impulse response. So we have shifted the impulse response, right? And this shifting is being done in such a way that all the coefficients of the impulse response is on the positive scale, resulting into a causal filter. So you could see here, now I call this as my final filter coefficients, right, which is causal also and which is symmetrical also. So remember these two characteristics whenever we design an FIR filter, right? It should be of finite duration, so we have obtained a finite impulse response. Secondly, we have obtained a symmetrical impulse response. If you see here, coefficients are symmetrical, right? So we have obtained a symmetrical impulse response, and the third thing that we have done is we have also maintained the causality, right? And therefore we call this as my final filter coefficients, whereas this is not my final filter coefficients. Even though this is the impulse response of my filter, I cannot call this as my final filter because it's of infinite duration. So we have done certain modifications on this, and we call this as the final filter of the final filter coefficients of the filter that we are going to design. And this method, this approach of designing the filter is called as the Fourier series method. So Fourier series method basically involves simple truncation and then shifting the coefficients in such a way that we maintain the linear phase response by obtaining a symmetrical impulse response. So what is the procedure? Let us list out the procedure now. So the procedure for designing Fourier series method basically involves, right? The first step is, from the desired frequency response, apply inverse Fourier transform to get the impulse response HDN. But what is your HDN? HDN is of infinite duration, and therefore in step 2 what we do? We truncate that infinite length of impulse response between minus q to some plus q number of samples. And why do we truncate maintaining minus q to plus q? Is to get the linear phase characteristics, so that we get a symmetrical impulse response. By truncating it from minus q to plus q, we have obtained a symmetrical impulse response. And in the third step, we delay or we shift the impulse response so that we get a causal filter. So that we get a complete causal filter. So these are the basic steps involved in Fourier series method. Now let us understand what is the drawback in Fourier series method. So here a complete analysis is shown that will help us to identify the drawback in Fourier series method. So let us again revisit the steps that we had seen when we designed the Fourier series method. So the first step was we started with filter specifications. So we were asked to design a low pass filter with a cutoff frequency of 500 Hz. So from this filter specifications, we obtained our desired frequency response. So this turned out to be our desired. We wanted our filter to be having such a characteristic: smooth passband, sharp cutoff, and this was our desired frequency response. So from the given specifications, we obtained this as our desired frequency response. Then once we design our desired frequency response, the next step that we do is we take inverse Fourier transform of it and get the time domain characteristics of the filter, which we call as the impulse response of the filter. So this is the impulse response. So what were the observations? The observations was that the impulse response is symmetrical, and secondly, major problem was they were of infinite duration. The impulse response is of infinite duration. So to get a finite impulse response filter, the very next thing that we did was we truncated it and shifted it and making it finite and causal, and this was our final frequency final filter coefficients of the filter that we expect to design. Once I get my final filter coefficients, I'm interested in looking at how is the frequency response of my filter that I have designed. Now this is my final filter coefficients. I will now take the Fourier transform of it. So I'll now transform from time domain back to frequency domain. So this is what I call this as the filter coefficients of the low pass filter. Whatever I have obtained after doing Fourier series method are the filter coefficients of a low pass filter. So I am interested at looking out how is actually my low pass filter with the filter coefficients I have designed. So when I look at the frequency response of my filter coefficients, this is what I have obtained. This is the frequency response of the designed filter. Understand, we started with such a specifications and we obtained the filter coefficients, and looking into the frequency spectrum of our designed filter coefficients, we obtain the frequency response of the designed filter. So the first thing that we observe is, yes, we have obtained a low pass filter, but what we have lost is we don't have a smooth pass band as compared to what we started. Neither we have a sharp cutoff the way we had assumed in the specifications, and neither do we have complete zero attenuation in the a very, we could say, very high attenuation in the stop band. No, I observe certain ripples also in the stop band, right? I observe some ripples in the stop band. I observe certain ripples in the pass band. So ripples are observed in the pass band. Also we observe wider transition band. So we have not got a sharp cutoff. We have got an output which is having a transition, right? It is making a transition from pass band to stop band. This band we call as the transition band. So what we observe is that after we have designed the filter by Fourier series method, we have not got the desired characteristics exactly matching to what we started with the filter specifications. We get a low pass filter, but with additional modifications that we get ripples in the pass band, we get some ripples in the stop band. And these ripples in the pass band, these ripples in the stop band, this effect of generating the ripples in the pass band and stop band is called as Gibbs phenomenon. This effect is called as Gibbs. Finite filter coefficients are multiplied by window function to get the finite filter. So we could say now this is a systematic truncation. By multiplying with a window, we are performing truncation. There's no doubt. But we are performing the truncation in a systematic way instead of doing an abrupt truncation as we performed in IIR in the Fourier series method, right? And this systematic truncation now reduces the ripples in the passband and stop band, and it also shows a better behavior in the transition band. So this is the advantage of why we go for designing FIR filters with window method. So let us look at what are the steps involved in designing FIR filters using windows. So very first step is very common as seen earlier, is to get the frequency response from the filter specifications. So if I analyze this, if I with the previous method, right? What we discussed in Fourier series method, we were expected to design an FIR low pass filter, right, with a cutoff frequency of 500 Hz. If I use the same specifications, then I can get my desired frequency response. From the given specifications, the very first thing we do is we obtain the desired frequency response, right, HD omega, right, from the specification. So the specifications involves the type of the filter, the cutoff frequencies. With this information, we first obtain the desired frequency response from the given specifications. Once we get the frequency response, then we transform it into time domain by applying inverse Fourier transform. By applying inverse Fourier transform, we obtain the time domain response HDN. So this is the equation of inverse Fourier transform. So this is the filter, this is the impulse response of the filter. But what do we know about this? That this impulse response obtained by taking inverse Fourier transform of the filter specification turns out to be infinite duration. So this impulse response is of infinite duration, and hence we need to make it finite so that we call the filter as the FIR filter. This infinite impulse response that you are going to obtain at this stage is made finite by multiplying with the window. So we are going to multiply the impulse response with a window and we are going to truncate it. Right? So we are going to truncate it. Now you could see here, after I multiply it with a window, my impulse response exists only for m number of samples. Earlier it was infinite in duration. By multiplying with a window, we have made it finite. So now we get an impulse response which is of finite duration. So we have not abruptly truncated the C infinite series in phi. Instead, what we have done is we have multiplied it with a window and systematically truncated it to a finite length. Then now let us look at what is really this window. So there are basically many window functions in use. The typical window functions is, let us start it with a rectangular window. So this is the window. All the samples of this window having unit magnitude, and here I have assumed a length of 40. So this is a rectangular window with all the samples of the window of unit magnitude. So this is how we define the window. This window, rectangular window, has all the samples 1 over the period that we have defined. So now if we multiply this particular window with an infinite impulse response, definitely the infinite impulse response turns out to be finite, and the length of the finite duration is decided by the length of the window, because we say that the length of the window is 1 over a certain period and is 0 otherwise. So since it is 0 outside this length, an infinite series becomes finite by multiplying it with a window. This is the simplest window because all the samples have unit magnitude. Let us look at some more window functions. The next window is a Hamming window governed by this particular equation. This is the equation of the Hamming window, and this is the shape of the Hamming window as obtained from this equation. Right? So you could see that it is having a kind of Gaussian shape. The magnitudes is governed by this particular equation. Outside of this, again the window is 0. So when you multiply an infinite impulse response with such a window, definitely it turns out to be of finite duration. The next window is the Blackman window. The equation of Blackman window is as shown, and this is the characteristics of the window. So if you compare all the windows, you could see the shape of the windows differ. The way the windows tend to 0 also differs. So the shape of the window differs, and this, as the shape differs, the characteristics of the window differs. So how these windows are going to affect the overall frequency response is what we'll see as we go ahead. Now, what is the step involved in designing a filter using window? Is that we multiply the infinite impulse response with the window. So this multiplication results in a new impulse response which is now of finite duration, and I can call this as my FIR coefficients. This Hn is nothing but the FIR filter coefficients because it is of finite duration. Now let me look at the same equation with the perspective of frequency domain. So multiplication in time domain becomes convolution in frequency domain. As per the convolution theorem, multiplication in time domain becomes convolution in the other domain. So here we are multiplying the signals in time domain, so that results in convolution. So this star indicates convolution operation. So multiplication in time domain becomes convolution in frequency domain, where h omega is the frequency response of the designed filter, hd omega is the frequency response of the infinite impulse response, that is, it is called as hd omega is the desired frequency response which is obtained from the filter specifications, and w omega is the window frequency response. So we are convolving. The way we said that we are multiplying, here we can now say here we are convolving the desired frequency response with the window function, right, with the window frequency response to obtain the final filter frequency response. Since this hd omega is obtained from the filter specifications, this cannot be changed. To modify this filter, the window frequency response plays a very important role. Therefore, we can say that the convolution of hd omega with the window function results into the frequency response of our truncated impulse response. So the entire behavior of how the final filter frequency response will be is decided by the frequency response of the filter, because hd omega is the desired frequency response which we expect at the end to obtain. So how is this modified is entirely governed by the window frequency response. The way the window frequency response is will be deciding the frequency response of the final filter. So what we need to do now is analyze the frequency response of the window. We need to understand the frequency response characteristics of the window. So let us look at the equation and at the characteristics of the window. So as just discussed, we are convolving the desired frequency response with the window. How is the window equation? We know. How is the convolution equation? Convolution equation is this. We have seen many a times. This is the convolution equation, and who is the governing factor here is the window. This is the frequency response of your window, right? Now let us look at all the three windows and their frequency characteristics so that we can understand how is the window characteristics affecting the final filter response. That is our aim now, right? How is the window deciding the frequency characteristics of the final filter? So look at the three figures carefully. This is your rectangular window, this is your Hamming window, and this is your Blackman window, right? So this is the time domain characteristics. What we have done is we have obtained the Fourier transform of these three, and this is the plot of their frequency response. This is the plot of their frequency response, right? This is the frequency response of rectangular window. This is the frequency response of Hamming window, and this is the frequency response of the Blackman window, right? So frequency response is the response of the how is the response of the system in frequency domain. So in time domain, the window is having all the samples of unit magnitude. In frequency response, the response of the rectangular window is as seen. So what we commonly observe in all the three is there is one first lobe which is having the highest magnitude. This first lobe in all the three is said to be the main lobe. Okay, when we look at all the three frequency characteristics, what we observe is that the very first lobe in all the three windows is called as the main lobe. Following all are called as the side lobes. Following all the lobes are called as the side lobes, right? So we have main lobe followed by the side lobes in every window characteristics that we see. Now let us look at these characteristics closely. So here is shown the frequency characteristics of rectangular window. Okay, so as you have seen, rectangular window, every window has the first lobe which is the highest magnitude lobe called as the main lobe. So this is the main lobe, and what follows after the main lobe are all called as the side lobes. What follows after the main lobe are all called as the side lobes. So here in case of rectangular window, what is the width of the main lobe? The width of the main lobe is 4 pi by n. You could see here. Width of the main lobe is 4 pi by n. This is the width of the main lobe. Right. Now what is so much of importance when we look into the frequency characteristic? Why are we focusing on the characteristics of the window? It is because this main lobe decides the transition width, right? This main lobe affects the transition width in the final frequency response. Whereas what is the role of side lobes? Side lobe governs the magnitude of your repulse. So these side lobes affect the repulse in the final frequency response. So I repeat, the main lobe affects the transition width, or main lobe is deciding the transition width in the final frequency response, whereas the side lobes, they decide or they govern the amplitudes of the repulse. What will be the strength of the side of the repulse in the maybe in the pass band, maybe in the stop band. So these side lobes decide the magnitude of the repulse in the final frequency response. So with this information, if we look into the previous characteristics of all the windows, right? Look at the rectangular window. The rectangular window as seen here has minimum main lobe, right? Minimum width of the main lobe, whereas the width of the main lobe goes on increasing as we move from Hamming window to Blackman window. So when do we prefer to go for rectangular window? So rectangular window has minimum width of main lobe, and as the width of the main lobe is minimum, definitely rectangular window results into a sharp cutoff in the final frequency response, because main lobe governs the transition width. So if the main lobe itself is narrow, the transition width is narrow, and therefore we can say that if we design a filter using rectangular window, we can get a sharp filter cutoff characteristics. Whereas if we go for Hamming window or Blackman window, as the width of the main lobe is wider, you could see here the width of the main lobe is wider, that affects the transition width. Broader the main lobe, broader will be the transition width. So broader the transition width means we won't get a sharp cutoff characteristics, right? There will be a major difference between the pass band edge frequency and the stop band edge frequency because the main lobes are larger. Main lobes results into larger transition width, and hence Hamming window and Blackman window won't give us sharp cutoff characteristics in the filter. Whereas now let us look at the stop band at the side lobes, right? Let us look at the side lobes. You could see here the side lobe, right? The side lobe strength is hardly, you could say, only 13 dB down in case of rectangular window, whereas in Hamming window the side lobes are having very less strength, whereas here the strength of the side lobe is quite prominent. Here, when I go to Hamming window and further to Blackman window, the side lobes are having very less strength, whereas the strength of the side lobe in rectangular window is very large, right? And when the side lobes are prominent, as I can see here in rectangular window, side lobes are having significant magnitude, and this results in ripples. So if the side lobes are very very prominent, what is the effect of it on the filter? If your side lobes are very prominent in the frequency response of your window, it results into larger ripples or oscillations in the pass band and stop band. So what I observe now here, what we can comment is, when I go for rectangular window, since the width of the main lobe is very narrow, I can say that we can get a sharp filter cutoff characteristics of the filter, but at the same time we are compensating for the ripples. We will get sharp cutoff with high ripples in the pass band and stop band. Whereas as I go for Hamming window and Blackman window, what I observe? I observe that the main lobe is very wide. That results into larger transition width. But with what is the plus point? As the side lobes are minimum, there will be minimum ripples in the pass band. There will be minimum ripples in the stop band. Similarly, the same is observed for Blackman. There will be larger transition width, but the ripples in the pass band and stop band will be comparatively less as compared to rectangular window. So this is how you choose the window characteristics. This is how you choose the windows. So if your application demands sharp cutoff, right, then we can prefer rectangular window. If your application demands that I can have a compensation with the cutoff, but there must be minimal ripples in the pass band and stop band, in that case we can go for Hamming window and Blackman window. So choosing the window is very very important. The choice of the window is entirely governed by the application. Okay, if your application demands a very sharp cutoff, then rectangular window could be a good choice. If your application demands minimum ripples, then Blackman window or Hamming window would be a good choice. So here is the specifications of your windows, right? So there are very other windows also, rectangular window, Hamming window, Blackman window, right? So what you can understand here, you could see a peak to side lobe level. How do you read this table? Right, peak to side lobe level. So in rectangular window, your first side lobe is only 13 dB down from the main lobe. Whereas in Hamming window, the first side lobe is 31 dB down. It means that your side lobe is is 31 dB down, means it is having a very less magnitude, whereas the side lobes are very prominent in rectangular window because they are hardly 13 dB down from the peak, that is from your main lobe. Whereas as I go for Blackman window, you could see here the side lobes are having minimum strength. They are 57 minus 57 dB down from the peak, from the main lobe. So Blackman window has as you could say that minimum strength of the side lobe levels. But when the strength of the side lobe level goes down, definitely, right, where is the energy of those side lobe level going, friends? See, there is one correlation here, right? When the side lobe energy reduces, where does that energy goes? We know law of conservation of energy, right? Energy can neither be created nor be destroyed. It just transforms from one form to another form. So here we could say that in Hanning and Blackman window, friends, the energy in the side lobes is minimum. Then where has this energy gone? And that's why this energy has moved into your main lobe and making your main lobe wider. That is the reason, right? Because here the energy is minimum. This energy goes in main lobe, making the main lobe wider. Here, if the main lobe is narrow, then where is this energy transformed? This energy goes into your side lobes, and that's why you could see the side lobes are so prominent in rectangular window, because the energy has moved from the main lobe to the side lobes, making the side lobes very, very prominent. So that is the reason why we cannot get both equally. We cannot get sharp characteristics with minimum ripples. No, it is not possible. If you go for one characteristics, you need to compensate for the other. If you want sharp characteristics, sharp cutoff characteristics, you have to compensate for the ripples. If you want minimum ripples, you need to compensate for the cutoff characteristics. That is the behavior of your windows, right? So this is the transition bandwidth dependent on n, where n is the length of your window, and this is the side lobe stop band attenuation provided by the different windows, right? So you could see here, as the side lobes are minus 57 dB down in Blackman window, friends, it is providing, highest stop band attenuation. It is providing 74 dB attenuation in the stop band, whereas your rectangular window is hardly providing 21 dB stop band attenuation. That is how you understand this particular table. Another important window, friends, is the Kaiser window. Kaiser window is said to be the best window among all the windows. Why is it so? Because it has an adjustable factor called as beta. In this equation, there is one factor called as beta. This beta is an adjustable factor because this controls the shape of the window. You can have a variation in the shape of the window in case of Kaiser window, which is not possible in any other window characteristics. So this window has an adjustable characteristics that changes the shape of the window, and that's why Kaiser window is said to be the best window, because we can have the desired characteristics obtained from the Kaiser window by adjusting this beta factor. This is better understood by this particular figure, friends, right? What is seen here is Kaiser window plotted for different values of beta. So as you change the beta, the frequency characteristics of your Kaiser window changes. If you make your beta value 0 in the Kaiser window, you get a characteristics which is very, very similar to rectangular window. If you keep your beta value as 5.44, you get the characteristics of your Kaiser window to be very closer to Hamming window. If you keep your beta value as 3.86, you get a characteristics which is very similar to Hanning window. It means that you can obtain any window from the Kaiser window. You can design any window using Kaiser window. So you can obtain any intermediate characteristics also. If you adjust your beta value, you can get any intermediate characteristics of the window using this particular Kaiser window, and that is what is the advantage of why we go for Kaiser window. So we can obtain any desired characteristics as per the specifications. You can design your Kaiser window and get the required characteristics of your window. So this is all about designing FIR filters using window method.